Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Lauren coming in with Digital Nomad Lifestyle. Coming in today with what could possibly be my best story. Pretty damn scary part of my life, but a very entertaining one. So, taking a step back, some background. When I was a younger lad over in the US, working my way through college, I didn't have a whole lot of money, but I wanted to see the world, right? And so I came across this documentary with my buddy, Thumbs Up. And he had a couple different videos. The dude's name is Dave Cho, really awesome artist, and he hitchhiked all over the world, really. And I remember watching him and seeing him hitchhike and traveling the world for free and being like, this is fucking it, man. Because I knew I wanted to see the world, but I didn't have any money, right? I was about 19, 20 years old, living in a teeny house with like 4 friends. I wanted to see the world, but didn't have any money. Realized hitchhiking's the way to do that. So me and my buddy, we got together a plan to hitchhike from the middle of the United States to New York. Anybody who's familiar with the United States knows that the United States is huge, right? Altogether, I think this would probably be somewhere around anywhere from 2,000 to maybe 3,000 kilometers or something like that would be my guess as far as the distance. Maybe 4,000. I'm not really too sure. I don't know the distance in miles either. It's fucking long way. You'd be cruising through a couple different European countries to get that same distance. We put together this plan. I'm not a very good planner, but my buddy Chaz did, right? So he's got the plan together. He's got a tent. We got all this stuff, everything packed up, right? We head out on our way, right? We start hitchhiking. And first couple days were kind of rough. It took us a long time to get picked up. I think there was one day where we waited like 8 or 9 hours to finally get picked up on the side of the road. So we're sitting on the side of the road waiting 8 or 9 hours in the middle of fucking nowhere. Incredibly boring, as you'd imagine. Then finally we get to St. Louis. So St. Louis, Missouri, about halfway from where we started, Denver, Colorado, to New York, right? So we've kind of made it through some trials and tribulations. We've got some cool stories and stuff like that, but it is starting to wear on us, right? We're sleeping outside. We're eating either food out of the trash can or going into a hotel, right? Pretending that we're staying there and eating the free breakfast. I did have some oatmeal and protein powder that I had brought with me. We'd cook that up sometimes as well, but the food's getting a little bland, right? The excitement's starting to wear off like any other trip. After your first couple days, the excitement starts to wear off. And we're there in St. Louis. We're trying to find a place to sleep, and I'm kind of freaking out. We get in St. Louis, and we land close to the river. It's a pretty exciting part of town, to say the least, right? And I remember there being like a bunch of this whole street just packed full of like kick-ass cars with these badass rims and people like blaring rap music. And I think we'd walked for, I'd say like 2 or 3 kilometers, and we were the only white people there, right? So just feeling like you were out of place, right? Not that we're the only white people, so automatically it's a dangerous thing. But for somebody from Denver at that point, where it's mostly white people, being in a crowd of people where you're the only person who looks like you and everybody else looks different, and everyone's staring at you is pretty uncomfortable, right? And so we're getting there. It's pretty uncomfortable. It was pretty damn cool. I do have to say they had some pretty badass cars and like the hydraulics and bump and stuff like that. We get through that, and then we're in a part of town that's not super great. My buddy just wants to go to sleep. My buddy Chaz, who we put together this whole trip, he just wants to go to sleep. He's had enough of like walking around. It's late, it's dark outside. I think it's like 10 o'clock. And I was kind of having a little bit of like a panic attack, kind of freaking out. It's like, dude, I'm not sleeping in a fucking abandoned building, dude. I've watched enough movies. I know what happens when you sleep in an abandoned building. So we walk around trying to find some place to sleep. We're in this more dangerous part of town. It's the middle of the night. We're walking around alone, me and him with backpacks on. Clearly, we're not from there. Very clear targets, right? Finally, after 2 or 3 hours of walking around, we find a rooftop to sleep on, right? So it's a rooftop of a garage behind an apartment building, right? We find a way to climb on top of this rooftop, and I feel like, okay, if we're on top of this rooftop, it's only 1 story high, right? But we're about, 2-3 meters off the ground, right? So people can't see us. I do feel more comfortable there. If we're here on this rooftop, we should be safe, right? So we go to sleep. My buddy Chaz uses one of his shoes as a pillow that night. We wake up in the morning, we look at each other, we're covered in black soot. Turns out that rooftop had been covered in black tar. So we were covered from head to toe in this black soot. And I was like, we were both like, son of a bitch. And we got, maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep because it was a weekday, right? We went to sleep probably around like 1 o'clock in the morning, and around like 5 or 6 people were getting up and walking around. And there was an apartment building next to us, so they could easily look down and see two bums sleeping on top of the garage, and we didn't want the cops being called, so we had to leave. Right, so we get, maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Now we got to wash all this black soot off of us, right? We don't have any money. We're not staying in any hotels or anything. So what's the plan? So we walk around trying to find somewhere. We find a park. Go in the park, bathe in the pond. So we're in a public park, bathing in a pond. People come by to take our photos while we're bathing in the pond. I was just smiling and waving. At this point, for me, this is when it's exciting. And for a long part of my life, I think fighting against something was what really drove me in things. If I tend to quit things when it gets easy and when I know that I can achieve them, right? When I'm in the middle of fighting for something, that's the last time that I want to quit. So for me, this is when it was like really hitting the pinnacle. I was like, fuck yeah, dude, It's like we're out here, we're living it, we're figuring out, we're problem solving, we're figuring out solutions. It's like we're having this crazy ass fucking time. My buddy Chaz was on the did not agree with this. His mom was freaking out. His mom had hitchhiked when she was younger. And she's like, you don't know how evil people are out there. I went to sort of liberal arts type school almost, right? I studied psychology. I was in a lot of sociology classes. And I was essentially brainwashed to believe that the world is a good place full of good people and that people are just misunderstood, right? I still genuinely believe that, right? But I was a little idealistic at that time. And I genuinely believe that, right? And as the trip goes on, that mindset keeps playing in my head almost like this mantra or affirmation of the world's a good place full of good people who are just misunderstood. And that led me into a bit of a trap, right? So, a little bit of foreboding there. But to go back to St. Louis, we just got finished sleeping 3 to 4 hours on a rooftop covered in tar. We're covered in black soot. My buddy used his shoe as a pillow that night. Now we're bathing in a public pond to try to get clean. And then we go in the morning for a little bit of a splurge, right? So we're splurging on some McDonald's or Carl's Jr. or something like that. Can't remember. So we're sitting there at a very fancy fast restaurant, living the luxurious life, taking a break from being homeless. Sitting there, my buddy's mom calls him. She's freaking out, still thinks that he's gonna fucking die. And she was able to convince him to turn back around and to go back and to fly back to Denver. She bought him a ticket. I remember him leaving the restaurant and my hand started shaking a little because I knew what was happening. I knew that his mom had talked him into turning back, right? And I looked down on him for many years for turning back because in my mind, like, this is when the adventure begins, not when like everything's going smooth. It's like when the shit gets hard, that's when like the real adventure starts, right? So I'm sitting there kind of shaking my hands because I'm freaked out because I'm about to hitchhike for another, like I said, I don't know, maybe 1,000 or 1,500 kilometers by myself, right? So I'm sitting there kind of shaking. He comes back. I already knew what he was going to say. I couldn't even look him in the eyes. He's like, oh man, I'm going to go back, but my mom can buy you a ticket if you want, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, man, I made a decision to get to New York. And my sister, my younger sister, had mentioned, dude, you're never going to hitchhike to New York. You're an idiot. And that was another thing that really drove me. Proving Candace wrong. I had a vision in my mind of me standing in the middle of Times Square flipping her off. And I wasn't going to allow that dream. I needed to have that dream come to fruition. I needed to manifest that. That was my dream. That was my goal. To flip my sister off in the middle of Times Square and prove her wrong. Prove the fucking haters wrong. You don't think I can fucking hitchhike across the U.S.? Watch me, goddammit. I'm gonna sleep on fucking rooftops, sleep outside, I'm gonna fucking walk into hotels, I'm gonna eat out of trash cans. Fuck, bro. So, we're going. Buddy's leaving. I'm sitting there, hands are still kind of shaking a little worried, but whatever, dude. He's leaving. I'm sitting there and now hitchhiking by myself, right? So first car that picks me up, I get dropped off, get a ride for 5-10 kilometers to East St. Louis, which is probably the worst place to be, right, as an outsider. Definitely one of the more dangerous neighborhoods in the United States. If you don't agree with me, add the comments in the bottom and tag your friends and start complaining about what a moron I am and how safe that neighborhood is. That would really prove me wrong and help out the algorithm. So, East St. Louis, walking around, and there's certain neighborhoods where you don't really need to be told that this is a bad neighborhood. I've seen this all over the world. There's bad neighborhoods where people need to tell you there's a bad neighborhood, and then there's bad neighborhoods where you can walk around the neighborhood and you can see how poorly maintained things are, and you realize very quickly how bad the neighborhood is. East St. Louis, in my experience, was one of those neighborhoods. Nobody needed to tell me that East St. Louis was bad. Walking around that neighborhood, you could tell, right? You're walking the streets. These streets have weeds coming out that are, half a meter tall, that haven't been cut in a while. Abandoned houses all over the place. It was very obvious that this is a pretty rough neighborhood, right? Get picked up by some dude, right? Some dude who had a full grill, who ran a landscaping business over there. Started talking to me, and I'm talking to him about East St. Louis, and he kind of just goes, East St. Louis is what you make of it, which I thought was a really interesting way to look at it. And I think life in general, right? If you want to, fucking die in East St. Louis, if you want to do stupid shit, you're gonna fucking die. But if you mind your own business, in most cases, you'll probably be fine. There's plenty of people who live in East St. Louis and neighborhoods, and they get by, and they raise kids, right? So I thought that was an interesting perspective. But all the while, right, I keep going on this hitchhiking trip. I get picked up. I'm hitchhiking by myself. It was freaking me out, but after a while, things are getting calm. I got picked up by some heroin addicts in Illinois. They were a little sketchy, right? But, hey, everything worked out. They wanted a little bit of money. I told them, I was like, dude, I'm fucking broke, man. I don't have any money. Sorry, but they dropped me off. Nothing happens. I get picked up by some fucking lunatic. Some dude who clearly had PTSD from his time in the military. And he starts, chanting off in this very, ravenous voice some chant of the Navy or something like that in the middle of these cornfields in Illinois with this look of rage in his eyes, right? And while these things are happening in East St. Louis, this crazy military dude picking me up, these heroin addicts picking me up, me getting dropped off, or me getting left alone, hitchhiking alone, right? And I'm getting I have these moments where I'm like, oh shit, man, things might happen, shit might go down, but then it doesn't. It reinforces that mantra: the world's a good place full of good people. Right? And so over time, you get a little bit more comfortable with things, right? And you get a little bit more relaxed with things, and you start to have this faith in the world around you. Right? The world's a good place full of good people. Look at this. I'm hitchhiking by myself, seeing all this crazy stuff. So this last, get picked up by a trucker. Same thing. Great dude. Told me about Christianity. Told me about a great movie that turned me into a vegetarian for 3 years. Right? Truckers were the scariest people in my mind back then when I was hitchhiking. No, I had truckers. Those guys are a bunch of creepy old, lonely dudes who want to have sex with you. Nope. World's a good place, full of good people. Get dropped off Blue Springs, I think it's Blue Springs, Virginia. Right on the border of West Virginia and Virginia. Sit there for about 2 or 3 hours. Finally, this dude picks me up. Dude pulls over. His car is full of trash, right? Which is a bit of a red flag. It takes him about 2 or 3 minutes just to clear all the shit out of his front seat, maybe 5 minutes, clearing all the trash out of his front seat so I can sit down. I sit down, we start talking. He starts asking me questions. Oh, where are you from? Is there anybody else who's traveling with you? Do you have a family? Stuff like that. What are you doing on the road? And I'm kind of answering these questions. And I have these sort of canned responses that I had all the time of, it's like, oh yeah, my mom freaks out and she worries about me, and he's asking about my family and stuff like that. How do they feel about me hitchhiking? I have these canned responses of, oh yeah, my mom has GPS on me, and if I don't respond to her text messages within half an hour, she freaks out, blah, blah, blah. Which is total bullshit. I talked to my mom one time that entire trip. But there are canned responses to kind of help me feel a little bit safe, or to mitigate the likelihood of some crazy shit going down. So then he starts asking me some more personal questions. Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. So you're not like a drifter or anything. So do you have anybody who loves you? A little bit of a weird question, right? But hey, the world's a good place full of good people, so I didn't think much about it. Yeah, I do, and talked about my mom again and GPS and blah, blah, blah. Oh, interesting, okay. So have you had any creepy dudes pick you up or anything like that? And I'm like, no. And he's like, that's a little weird. You're a good-looking guy. You figure that you'd have some creepy old dudes picking you up, trying to hit on you, have sex with you and stuff like that. And I'm like, nah, man, everybody's been pretty cool so far. And he goes, oh, interesting. And then I had a longboard on me, with me. It's like a longer skateboard that I used to get around. And it had the equal sign, LGBTQIA plus equals equal rights. And he goes, oh, I saw that you have the equal sign. Are you part of the community? And it's like, no, not really, but I do agree that, love is love. And love whoever you want. I mean, it's not really anybody else's business. He goes, oh, interesting. So you're not gay or anything like that? I'm like, nah, still no red flags. And he goes, well, how do you know you're not gay? And I was like, well, you just don't really have the feelings. He's like, well, have you been with a man? And I was like, nah. And he goes, well, then how do you know? And I was like, well, you wouldn't really go to a gay person and ask if they've been with a woman. And if they hadn't, say, how do you know that you're not straight, right? That wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I kind of checkmated him there. I didn't really have a good argument for that. He goes, oh, okay, I gotcha. And he's like, well, I wanted to tell you the truth about something. I'm like, sure, man, go ahead. Well, I was driving and I drove past you before, and then I drove down the road and I actually turned back around and came back to get you, right? And I was like, oh, okay. And we were in the middle of nowhere. Like at this point, it was like just like these country roads, right? I mean, these are small little towns. I think it probably took them about 15 or 20 minutes to drive past me, get off the highway, turn back around and come back. Right? So like that's a pretty big detour to pick somebody up. But still no red flags. The world's a good place, full of good people. I'm like, oh, thanks, man. And he's like, well, can I tell you something else? And I'm like, sure, dude. And he goes, well, I picked you up because I thought you were cute. And I'm like, thanks, man. Still, world's a good place, full of good people, right? And then, this is giving him some confidence, right? Because I'm not really, deflecting his questions as much, It's like he's starting to build some confidence. It's like, oh, yeah, dude, I'm going to be able to do what I want with this guy, And then he goes, well, can I ask you something else? I'm like, sure, dude. He's like, would you let me blow you? I'm like, nah, man, I think I'm okay. Still, world's a good place, full of good people. Right? And he's sitting there, and, he's in the driver's seat. And I'm sitting next to him. And then the mood changes, the tone of his voice and everything. And he looks me right in the eyes, and he goes, well, if I give you $50, would you let me blow you? Freaked me the fuck out. And all of a sudden, the red flags are fucking popping off. Now I see. Okay, this is why this dude asked me if anybody loves me. That's why he's asking me if anybody knows where I'm at. This is why he's asking all these personal questions. This dude's gonna fucking kill me. And then he starts talking about his wife and how he's like living in his cabin by himself and he's so lonely and blah, blah, blah. And, oh, can I join him in the cabin? And I'm like, dude, drop the fucking subject, man. Like, I'm not, like, you're not fucking blowing me. I'd appreciate if you fucking changed the subject right goddamn now. And I'm sitting there, and he's sitting there trying to like make some sort of small talk or something. And we're about 1 kilometer or 2 away from the exit. And I remember as we were there, I'm sitting there in the passenger seat. As we're pulling up to the exit, my hand is slowly moving over to the center console, right? Because in my fucking mind, I'm not about to get raped and fucking killed. If this motherfucker doesn't pull off at this goddamn exit wall, I'm grabbing that fucking e-brake and I'm gonna pull the emergency brake and we're flipping this fucking car. And we're dying together, damn it. I'm not dying with a fucking dick in my mouth and a fucking gun to my head. Fuck that. If I'm gonna fucking die, we're both fucking dying. And so we walk over. And so he's getting closer and closer. As he gets closer and closer, I'm inching closer and closer to that fucking e-brake. Fucking pull that motherfucker. He pulls over on the side of the road. Profusely apologizes. Oh man, I'm so sorry, dude. I'm just really lonely, with the wife leaving me and everything like that. And I couldn't fucking look him in the eyes. Freaked the fuck out. I'm like, dude, don't care, man. Don't fucking care. Like, leave me alone. Don't fucking touch me. I don't want a goddamn hug. And that was one of the few nights. I did have some emergency money together. It's one of the few nights I stayed in a hotel. And so I stayed in a hotel that night. I remember I was sitting there peeking through the blinds, freaking out, thinking that he's like fucking following me and shit like that. I called my friend Brittany, and I told her the whole story. And then Brittany, at the end of the story, goes, that shit happens to women all the time, Lauren. You need to get over yourself. And then she hangs up. And at that point, I had realized, wow, okay, so this is why women kind of freak out when we're going out to like clubs or when we're hanging out, right? Because, yeah, if there's some fucking creepy ass dude who's like really, really pushy, it's fucking scary. And thank God I didn't feel like this person could physically overpower me at any point. But if I were a small woman and there's some fucking huge dude who was twice my size who was acting like that, that'd be fucking terrifying. So I understood that. That was an interesting little glimpse into the bullshit that women have to deal with. And it's particularly bad in the U.S. with dudes being like really aggressive. I mean, I can't really speak to too many other cultures, it's like that's not really my place. But I know in the U.S. anyway, like there's just a lot of like really pushy dudes, and it's really fucking uncomfortable. I mean, in the situations that I've been in. So overall, do I think the world's still a good place full of good people? Yes, largely speaking. But I was a little naive. I think if I hadn't been so forceful with that guy, I really don't know what would have happened, right? I don't know if he would have killed me. But the fact that he was asking if I had loved ones, right? If I, it's like, oh, are you just a drifter, stuff like that. It felt, in his cabin in the woods, it felt a little like the opening scenes of a scary movie. So who knows? Who fucking knows? But all right. Till next time, stay sexy, bro.